Hey guys, how's it going? It's Lavelle Miller here with week 5 of my DraftKings predictions. I do this normally only for MMA, but I've been requested to do this for the NFL as well. I do fairly well in these tournaments, so to say. So decided to, from now on through the end of the season, go ahead and do NFL. I might do NBA. NBA be a lot trickier because they play every few days, so it might be a big weekend or something come up, and I might partake maybe around the Christmas game or maybe right before Thanksgiving or something like that to give you some players. But so without further ado, let's get into it. I'm sure a lot of you guys, if you watch this video, you've already done DraftKings before. So DraftKings is a PPR format, which means players get points for receptions, unlike FanDuel. So when you pick players, and specifically the ones that are receiving the ball, running backs, things like that, those are the ones who it goes to more. A running back may not get you a ton of points if you play in traditional fantasy lineups that don't do PPR, but in DraftKings they would, or how like my fantasy league is and how some other people's fantasy leagues are. They actually get points per reception, so the point totals might seem a lot higher than the ones that you see when you look at your weekly fantasy lineups. So keep it in mind, it is a PPR. When I start naming some of the running backs and stuff a little bit later. So this week coming up, there seemed to be a lot of great matchups. It was actually kind of hard to figure out who I want to pick. I don't want to do a lot of big name guys because these are guys that are going to be selected really high. And pretty much if you look at the DraftKings overall, when it shows you a percentage selected, the people who are selected the highest end up doing well. But if a lot of people pick them, you can kind of tell you guys are nickel and diamond for points when you look going up the roster because you're spending so much money on a lot of these bigger name players versus trying to go big here, go big there, and then, fill them out or fill them out with a whole bunch of people that's going to give you what you need. There's problems when I first started playing DraftKings I ran into where I would want to max the salary. For example, if you guys have never played, you get $50,000 and you have to get the players within that $50,000. So I would feel some type of way if I had, $2,000, $3,000 left, that I was like, man, I need to go back and go get another big player. Well, that has bit me in the past before. So now when I go with my lineups, I just go with them. I'm going to start this off with the quarterbacks. Now, mind you, I don't have a lot. Because like I said, there's a lot of great matchups this weekend for teams to possibly score huge points. So there are going to be names you've heard of on here. But then I'll give you reasons for some of the players why I pick. Some of them are more or less self-explanatory. So starting off with the quarterbacks, I got Matt Ryan. He's $6,600 this week. At Pittsburgh, Tom Brady, 6,300, plays tonight against the Colts at home. Drew Brees, 6,400, he plays Washington at home. Alex Smith, who plays the Saints, 5,900 at New Orleans. Andy Dalton, 5,900, home versus Miami. Derek Carr, 5,200 versus the Chargers. Josh Rosen, 4,700, playing at San Francisco. I don't know why I put that there. So, gave you the players, reasons why. Mainly, the Colts and the Patriots in history have normally been a high-scoring game. So that pretty much says that there. And also choosing Tom Brady is they have Julian Edelman back this week. So they've been suffering on offense without having a lot of people to go to. Gronk's been injured, double team, things like that. He has Julian Edelman back. They'll be able to do a lot of the diming things that they want to do and also go deep. So That's the reason why you picked him. Matt Ryan versus Pittsburgh, easy. Pittsburgh has a terrible defense. Matt Ryan with his weapons, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley are going to tear it up. Only thing that's kind of wishy-washy about how their team is going to play is the run game, because both the both the running backs are currently injured. They are listed as questionable to play, but you never know. So Deontay Freeman and I forgot this man's first name, Coleman. Sorry about that. I don't know how I forgot his name. Tevin Coleman. They're both questionable. Deontay Freeman did practice, but Coleman did not. Sorry about that. It seems like it went out of focus for some reason. Anyway, so Coleman didn't practice on Wednesday. He might practice later today, so that might be subject to change. Drew Brees normally always does well at home, especially when it comes to a lot of these points. He gets his running back today, Mark Ingram. Obviously, Alvin Kamara has been doing fantastically well. So this is just going to enhance their offense even more. Or it could end up hurting them, and they may feel like they need to get Mark Ingram more involved with the run game, so they may not pass as much. Washington did seem like they did have not a great, but a pretty good run defense. Actually, no, I'm sorry about that. They're 22nd. So that could be interesting. I think they're better off in the pass. One of them are better in. Alex Smith, because historically, you play the Saints, Drew Brees scores a lot of points. The opposing quarterback scores a lot of points. So that obviously makes sense. And then if you're looking, once again, when you finish your roster, Drew Brees is 64, Alex Smith is 59. You could get a lot of value in Alex Smith at being 59 instead of focusing on Drew Brees with the 64. As you see, that gives you some wiggle room in regards to the points you may be looking at trying to get. $500. So Andy Dalton at home at 5,900. He's, like I said, I already gave you all these points earlier, but Andy Dalton has been having a quiet, really good year this year. The only problem with that is that he lost Tyler Eifert for injury, but he does have two other tight ends that'll be jockeying for position to actually play. CJ, what's his name? CJ Uzma was actually leading all the categories statistically, I believe, for them. And he's actually supposed to still be like the second tight end, but, I wouldn't trust that. I would definitely use him. Derek Carr is my sleeper for all these guys because he's $5,200. And I went ahead and I checked a bunch of these other lineups because I did the Thursday through Sunday, and I checked the Sunday through Monday games as well. And so all these prices are the same. So the quarterbacks this week are actually fairly cheap. So where you're going to look for your value or being able to spend higher is on the wide receivers this week. But so Derek Carr's playing the Chargers. It's pretty much a home game because they both play in the same exact stadium currently right now. So I definitely would go with Derek Carr at that 5,200 with Jordy Nelson finally getting the swing of things, and Jared Cook. Pretty much already good to go there. Jared Cook almost had 2 touchdowns last week, but he only ended up having 1. But definitely he has options to stretch the field. Josh Rosen at 4,700 is playing San Francisco. He's his quarterback he's going against is CJ Bernarth, or however you say his last name. For the $4,700 value, I like Josh Rosen. He didn't do a lot last week. But San Francisco doesn't have that good of a defense. So, and they'll be trying to figure out what they need to do because they have issues with the running back as well. So, 4,700, he's at the bottom of my list for a reason. But if I'm looking for how can I save on the quarterback and go bigger somewhere else, Josh Rosen will be my pick. Running backs, once again, we're going to get into a lot of these household names here. Saquon Barkley at 7,700 versus Carolina, playing at Carolina. Sony Michel, 5,400 at Indy. James White, playing Indy at 6,100. Dion Lewis, 5,400, playing at Buffalo. Mark Ingram, 5,100, playing home against Washington. T.J. Yeldon, 5,600 at Kansas City. Patrick Lindsey, 4,800 at the Jets. Aaron Jones, 4,300 at Detroit. So with these running backs, Saquon, obviously, he's one of the most go-to options for that offense up there. For whatever reason, OBJ hasn't been able to really get it going, so they use Saquon a lot in the passing game and the running game against Carolina. So always trust him. He's going to get you about 20 points easily. Sony Michel and James White. Now you might ask, why did I put both of these guys down and they both play for New England? Well, they both scored almost 20 points. James White, I think, did get the 20, and I think Sony Michel was around 18 or so, almost 19 points. And mind you, they both played for the same team, but they do two different things. Sony Michel had over 100 yards on the ground and had some passes. James White, I believe, only had one rush, but he had 10 targets in the passing game and got a touchdown as well. So, Sony Michel, if people haven't been paying attention, he's been slowly getting his workload increased over time. So, that's the reason why he's still cheap at that 5,400. And James White is at that 61. Now, once again, this brings back up the PPR format. If James White wasn't getting points for his receptions that he was getting, he would have scored less than Sony Michel did, even though he had that touchdown and everything else, because his rushing yards and things like that. So this is where the PPR format kicks in. You can actually probably use both these guys tonight. Now, would you want to? I don't know, because James White can eat and Sony Michel cannot. And if you always know how the Patriots are with Bill Belichick's offense, either one of these guys can be the feature or nothing at all. So, but both of them are pretty good selections, I believe. If you're deciding on one, you might want to go with Sony Michel, cheaper route, 54, so you can spend money somewhere else. But James White is going to, if they're passing a lot tonight, which is, of course, it'll be a little too late. But James White is obviously, if you're looking for more PPR style, I would choose him. Because Dion may not, not Dion, but Sony Michel may not actually get another 100-yard night. And he's not used often in the pass game. So the reason why I said Dion Lewis is playing Buffalo. He isn't being used as much as the lead running back anymore. He's getting a lot of passes. And this is because Derrick Henry is doing a little bit better. So I still like him at the $5,400 value. I'm going against Buffalo, the worst defense in the league. And so he can get a lot of those passes. Marcus Mariota can dink and dunk to him. The only problem with this game is I don't believe a lot of points will be scored here overall. I think it'll be a 17-14 type game. But just because it's a 17-14 type game doesn't mean that Dion Lewis is not on the receiving end of two of those touchdowns. So I don't believe it'll be high scoring, but I like that matchup. Mark Ingram, the reason why he's on this list, this is his first game back coming from suspension, and he's at $5,100. So, like I said, what do the Saints do with this game? Do the Saints decide to keep going with the hot hand and run Alvin Kamara into the dirt? Or do they decide, hey, let's go ahead and choose to use Mark Ingram a lot more? Last year, they averaged about the same amount of touches a game. Now, with if they're a short yardage situation, who's going to get the ball? Mark Ingram. If they're inside the 5 on the goal line, who's going to get the ball? Mark Ingram. They're not going to be using Mike Gillislee anymore. He might be cut. And plus, with the couple of fumbles he did already in the season, you saw that it was going back to Kamara over and over and over again. Mark Ingram has also been working on his hands. So now, with how they both can do with the ball, running in the inside, running on the outside, and catching, Kamara over the next couple of weeks, his DraftKings value will come down, and Mark Ingram's will go up, and they'll be equal about the same. But right now, because the Mark Ingram is the unknown factor, Alvin Kamara's still way up there. He's still the highest priced running back, I think, at 96. So let me verify that. Yeah, he's at 96. He's the highest player overall. I'm not touching him, because if you want to use him, use Mark Ingram, because they will swap out a whole bunch this game, and a lot of guys who pick Kamara will definitely be hurt on that. That's not saying Kamara ain't gonna eat, but he's got to eat a lot for him to be worth 9,600. Almost, he's averaging almost 40 points. He's not going to get close to that in my prediction now, since Mark Ingram's back. TJ Yeldon, he's injured, but he's deemed to play. Leonard Fournette is out. They're playing against Kansas City. I didn't know Kansas City had like one of the worst defenses in the NFL. It's probably not paying attention because how well Patrick Mahomes has been doing. So it didn't really matter how bad their defense was. But I like him at $5,600 versus Kansas City. Blake Bortles is going to need somebody to not necessarily dump the ball off to, but is able to open up more options for him. They have a good run defense, but the pass defense is suspect. So if they end up having to, he keeps tearing them up on the outside, they're going to have to end up respecting that and allow TJ to get yards to run. Patrick Lindsey at 4,800 versus the Jets. Patrick Lindsey is a tough guy. Ran a sub 4.4 at the combine. Did well Monday night against the Chiefs. That's pretty much all needs to be said about him. He's $4,800 going against the Jets. The Jets are way worse than Kansas City. So I would definitely go with Patrick Lindsey. If I'm, once again, looking to save money, go bigger later. Aaron Jones is my sleeper out of his running backs for 4,300 versus Detroit. He recently came off suspension. He ended up having, let's see here. So last game, his first game at home, he ended up having a touchdown, 65 yards on the ground. He's going to get more and more touches. They're putting him back in the lineup. Aaron Rodgers has asked for him to be featured more. He has faith in his abilities. So I would definitely use him at the $4,300 versus Detroit. Detroit's not that good at all, and they're playing at home. If you notice, kind of on here, I like dome teams because I don't have to worry about the weather. I don't have to figure that stuff out. Now, it's hard to do that, but that's why there's some West Coast teams on here too, because of them playing in the sun. Less issues with regards to the weather. Always check the weather when you're looking at teams, because the weather depends on how the teams play. It's just natural. If it's really windy and really rainy out there, they're not going to throw the ball a lot. They're going to run it a lot. It might be causing for more fumbles, but it's more trust in fumbles not happening than the quarterback slipping the grip on a loose ball because it's wet. Let's get to the wide receivers. So, a lot of options. A lot of options for wide receivers, obviously. But as long as this one guy is cheap, you're going to use him. And some of the players that I'm finna mention now with the quarterbacks and the wide receivers, it'll seem to go together. I like tandems. I don't like having a quarterback without a running back or wide receiver associated to him. Now, it depends on the type of running back it is, but you don't want something like Tom Brady go off for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns and you don't have the wide receiver to complement to it. You could have been doubling up on points or tripling up on points instead of singly getting points just because of him. But, sometimes you're lucky because you can pick wide receivers. You could ended up picking Andrew Luck, who I don't have on this list, that goes for 500 yards and 6 touchdowns, and you picked up Chester Rogers, for example, and he received all 5 touchdowns. And so, who knows? But anyway, so with the wide receivers, Calvin Ridley, 5,800 versus Pittsburgh. Why? Because Pittsburgh has a horrid pass defense. Enough said. Antonio Brown at 9,100 versus Atlanta. Because why not? It's AB. They're going against Atlanta. Atlanta's missing starters on defense. So he's going to eat. He's always seems to get his. And then at the 9,100, mind you, depends on how you're doing the game, how you'd like to play. Juju Smith-Schuster, is 7,500, also playing against Atlanta. Believe right now he's still the statistical leader for stats for wide receivers for that team. Why? Because AB draws doubles and triple teams. Somebody's on top of him. So that means, guess what? Juju's a lot of times is one-on-one, and he's beating these guys one-on-one. 7,500, can't beat that. Michael Thomas playing at home against Washington. So, like I said, this goes back into the combination thing, especially like I forgot to mention Matt Ryan, Calvin Ridley, Michael Thomas, Drew Brees. He didn't get to eat as much as he wanted to the last game. The Giants did a lot to slow down his availability. So Drew Brees had to go find other options, which is something else that you should notice. Every game that Michael Thomas has had 10 or more catches, Drew Brees has also had a lot of points to go along with that. So this goes back and forth in regards of, like I'm saying, tit for tat. You have the quarterback, have the wide receiver match up with them. Jordy Nelson versus the Chargers for 4,500. Why did I pick Jordy Nelson? Jordy Nelson is finally now getting into his groove. And then, like I said, Derek Carr at 5,200. So, mind you, if you get Derek Carr and Jordy Nelson, at the 52-45 respectively, then you can also slide in you an AB at 9,100, and you can feel good about what you've done because you got a low quarterback that you believe is going to do well and a low wide receiver that you believe is going to do well. And that will complement you being able to get a higher priced wide receiver. That's what I would go big on this week is wide receivers, not necessarily running backs. Because, for example, Todd Gurley's playing the Seahawks. Seahawks still have a good defense, even though they got their issues, they're struggling. I wouldn't want him, and he's at 94. So I wouldn't choose him. And then, like I said, Alvin Kamara is way overpriced this week at 9,600 with the fact that Mark Ingram's returning, in my opinion. I could eat my words. If I do, y'all can just go ahead and drop stuff in the comment box below. So, anyway, back to round off these last few. Chester Rogers, like I mentioned him, he's 4,400. He's playing against New England. T.Y. is hurt right now. Chester Rogers took the opportunity to put in work with that at 4,400. I would definitely like him tonight playing New England. Julian Edelman, his return. He's 5,500. He's playing the Colts. So, mind you, some of these players that I'm mentioning, if you guys haven't put a lineup in tonight, I gave you some Colts and some Patriot players. You may want to go ahead and add them to your lineups tonight, especially, like I said, Julian Edelman coming back at the 55. He may do a lot for you when it's all said and done. Especially with Gronk being injured. Josh Gordon might be another selective pick. He only got targeted twice. He only played 18 snaps his last game. So I didn't even bother looking at him yet. Now Julian Edelman's back. He may actually do a lot more because now they'll be able to figure out the offense. But until they figure out his actual role, I'm staying away from him. I know a lot of people picked him last week because they thought he was going to be the next return of the king, but he wasn't. So tight ends, I typically always go cheap on. There's not a lot of tight ends who get a lot of points. I didn't, like I said, the goal of this was not to try to give a lot of predictable players. And so I tended to try to do that. So Jared Cook's my first one, 4,800, playing the Chargers. Like I said, he's finally getting into the swing of things. Derek Carr is using him a lot more with the new John Gruden offense. Always a reliable target, so I would choose him. George Kittle, 5,400. The reason why I chose him is because he did very, very well last week. And he also was a college teammate of one Josh Rosen. So they already have their chemistry together. They know about how well he breaks on routes, places he's good at catching the ball versus not. So that is going to be Josh Rosen's number one target for a while now. And I believe that's what they knew when they got him to the team. He's playing with somebody he's familiar with. So until Josh Rosen gets his full swing, involving Larry Fitzgerald or things like that, George Kittle will be his go-to. Vance McDonald. Oh my goodness, how did I forget who they're playing already? Yeah, they're playing the Falcons. So Vance McDonald for the past 2 games has had big catches for a lot of yards. I still do believe he's the second tight end behind Jesse James, but he's going to get you the points. It's hard to come by points a lot of times for tight ends. So Vance McDonald is definitely the choice. Once again, saves that money at that 3,700. And then here goes the sleeper of the tight ends. It's C.J. Uzomah at 2,900. Like I said earlier, Tyler Eifert is hurt. He ended up dislocating or breaking his ankle. So C.J. Uzomah has been leading the statistical category for the Bengals in receptions and yards. And he's still listed as the second tight end, I do believe. But who's he behind? Because this guy only has one. Tyler Croft.